waiting for you. So, so hello everybody. As you've noticed, some of you have noticed, we officially changed the name from New York Graphic Novel and Comic Book Creators to the Comic Arts Workshop. The web URL was available, and so much shorter than the last one. So tonight we are very lucky to have Jessica Stockton-Bagnulo.
Yes.
Okay.
Awesome.
As our guest. And Jessica is the co-owner and co-founder of Greenlight Bookstores in Brooklyn. I pass by it all the time when on my way to work.
Cool.
And you have a second location, right?
Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm.
And I came by Jessica by way of graphic novel TK. So Gina's coming next month.
I saw that. You guys are in first.
But we got you in first, so you kind of
I'll be like the
her.
opening act
there
for
you
Gina.
Go.
She's the real deal.
She's great. And let's see. So, and then after Gina, we also have Susan Graham, who is an agent. And then after that, I think, who else do we have? I'm not sure I have anybody else up until Diversity Comic Con in October. And then Gamal Hennessy at the end of October, talking about giving an actual workshop rather than just a talk. And I'm thinking that we should do something in between Gina and Susan, because it's like a whole 5 weeks gap right there. So maybe something more social rather than a speaker series. So, but anyway, so all our events are on the meetup page, the Comic Arts Workshop, comicartsworkshop.com. And I think we should begin. So if we could please give her a nice round of applause and thank you to Jessica. So Jessica, can you tell us a bit about what you do and what your career path was like that led you to where you are now?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I'm the co-owner of Greenlight Bookstore, which was founded 10 years ago this year. We're having an anniversary, which is kind of exciting. I do events and marketing for the store as well as being the owner. My business partner does kind of the buying and inventory management side, so we split that between us. And I've worked in bookstores and in the kind of events and marketing part of it for a long time. I got my first job in a bookstore when I was in college. I went to NYU and I had a really nice, graduate student teacher who was like, "Do you want to work in this bookstore that I know of?" I was like, "Sure," and that was my life. So I've been really lucky to work in some great independent bookstores in New York City. I worked in 3 Lives in the West Village, and then in what's now Book Culture, what used to be called Labyrinth on the Upper West Side, and then at McNally Jackson in Soho. And then wrote a business plan for the bookstore that I wanted to own, found a business partner, and through this sort of amazing, miraculous stream of events, ended up being able to open my own store, which is now doing really well. And then sort of parallel to that, I became a comics fan. Kind of later in life, for a minute I tried to not work in bookstores. I tried to work in publishing because I was like, I'm gonna have a grown-up job. I'm gonna sit at a desk. It's gonna be a real thing. And it did not last very long. The only thing that came out of it is I met this nice boy, and we ended up getting married. But early on in that relationship, it became clear that he was a big comics nerd, and I had never had never been my thing, but I sort of came to comics through him, and now I read way more superhero stuff than he does, and he thinks I'm weird. But it actually became. I was gonna jump to your next question. I can wait, but I was looking at these questions, which are great, and about what role did comics or graphic novels play in my career. And aside from now, I get to do fun stuff like programming events for comics artists and stuff, but early on, being someone who worked in bookstores and who also read comics turned out to be a really great asset because I got to be a translator between these really worlds that seem like they wouldn't be that different but are really different. The comics world and the books world don't talk to each other very well.
Yes.
It's like British and American English or something like that. So I ended up getting involved in the book industry and speaking on a lot of panels where I was talking to booksellers about comics. Not on the other side, because I wasn't enough of a comics expert to talk to comics people about books, but I got to sort of help translate a little bit about, what's interesting, what should you be looking for, who are the exciting artists, like how do you do the buying, and how do you talk to your customers about comics. So being someone who could speak both languages turned out to be a real asset for me as I sort of like found my way in the book industry.
Now, what I don't tell people is that I give you guys the questions, but I have a whole bunch of little follow-up questions.
Oh, good. Okay. Do that.
When you say comics to book people, are you talking about mainstream, big two comics, or are you talking about graphic novels?
That's a really good question, and I don't think anyone has a really clear idea of the answer to that question. One of the things I did when I was thinking about this panel is I looked at sales in our bookstore in the graphic novel section over the past year. So I was like, what has been selling? I know what I like, but what's doing well? What are our customers responding to? And it's definitely a mix. Most bookstores won't really have separate sections for DC and Marvel and indie comics. Everything is all mixed together if they even have a section. And what sells for us is both. I think certain superhero and fantasy franchises will do well, but it's almost always author driven. Mm-hmm. It's about having some really good writing and an author that you're following rather than I read all Spider-Man comics or whatever. But then we also, I feel like the ones that sort of cracked open the book industry for comics are Alison Bechdel and Art Spiegelman and those kind of, more literary kind of comics authors who sort of unlocked the possibilities of the medium for traditional book people, and then they can sort of grow and expand from there. So we do a lot of both, and increasingly so since sort of DC and Marvel comics are getting better distribution, which we can talk about separately. But yeah, I think it's all about if it's well written. I mean, bookstore people are a lot about the writing, so rather than a particular franchise. So I think that's what it's about.
Yeah, I think there seems like there's a bit of a divide between traditional comic books and graphic novels.
Yeah.
And one of my missions for this group and for Diversity Comic Con is sort of to bring those two sides together.
Yeah.
So last year when I did Diversity Comic Con at FIT, it was the first year. My contacts were mainly in mainstream comics. Mm-hmm. And this year I'm trying to get as many graphic novelists to come in as well.
Yeah.
And so Gina is actually going to be interviewing Ross Chast.
Oh, very cool.
In a panel. She'll be doing our keynote, Ross Chast will be doing our keynote, and then Gina will be interviewing her on a one-on-one.
Nice.
So it'll be nice.
Yeah, that's really cool.
If we can go back a little bit, so because you had worked in a whole bunch of bookstores before, were you fairly confident about opening up your own? Because that's a scary thing. Opening up a business is a scary thing, but it's less scary when you've had a lot of experience in that business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was particularly scary because we were trying to get funding to open a business in 2008, which was a really bad economic time, if anyone remembers that. It was crazy. But yeah, my business partner and I, between us, we were both, under 35 at the time and had combined 35 years experience in books. We both had just been working in the field and for a really long time. So we knew a lot about what worked and what didn't work, and we had seen that it could work. I mean, part of what we had to overcome was skepticism that independent bookstores are even a viable business at all. But we knew that it could be if it's done right, and if you do your research, if you find the right market, and lots of things come together. So yeah, we were able to have that confidence that we knew what we were doing. And our funding came from members of our community who sort of knew us and our background and had confidence in us as well. So that made a big difference. And when we could show that we had that, people actually putting their money in, then we could get funding from bigger lenders and make it all happen.
Now, you said you wrote a business plan. Mm-hmm. When you came up with the idea for the bookstore, what made your bookstore different from other bookstores that were already out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, in some ways, it was building on a lot of models that already existed. What was specific about it was that it was a Brooklyn bookstore in the 21st century, and it was thinking about things in those terms and in those sort of local terms, but also in a forward-thinking way. That we're all about the high touch human conversation quality that you get in an independent bookstore, we were also going to have a really strong e-commerce website, and we were also going to make sure that we were set up to do electronic ordering and get really quick turnaround on special orders and all of that kind of stuff. So it was thinking about the best of the traditions and then the best of looking forward. And my business partner and I also brought a lot of our own taste to it, in terms of aesthetics, but also in terms of the books we carried. And she's an amazing analytics person, so she does all of the buying and number crunching, and I don't mind speaking in front of people, so I do all the event stuff. So we had a good combination of stuff to make it all work.
So you decide you're gonna open the store. You got the space, you got the name, you got everything. How long does it take, or do you actually have to call up publishers and say, hey, we want to order some books? Or how long did that take to actually fill, from the time you got the space to the time it was full enough that you could open up your doors? How long did that take to fill up the store?
Yeah, I mean, it was, a lot of things were happening at the same time when you're working on opening a business. So it was like our contractor was still in the space, like, putting the floors in and building the shelves and all of that, putting the wiring in and whatever. And at the same time, we're having conversations with publishers being like, hi, we need to set up a line of credit so we can get books in, sell them, and then pay you with the money that comes in.
Publishers?
Yes, ideally. I mean, certain small publishers you do have to pay upfront or something with a credit card. But if you sort of can convince them that you are a good business risk, most publishers will set you up with a line of credit. So then you can actually sell the books first and pay for them afterward, which is ideal. We're still working on our line of credit, because every time we have a big event, we're like, hi, we need a little more. It's gonna be worth it, I promise. But so yeah, luckily my partner and I had a lot of connections and relationships in the book industry already, so we were able to. We knew who to call, and we knew what publishers were priorities for us from day one, and which could sort of wait and be added on later on.
Relationships.
Yes,
we've talked about that here.
I'm glad. I was going to say that was going to be one of my points, because I already know this.
I actually, in the daytime this whole week, I've been teaching middle schoolers comics.
Oh wow.
And I told them that, when we publish your comic, I want you to give me your social media handles.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to put it on the comic book. And I explained to them the whole idea behind keeping in touch and building relationships, even though they're only 12 years old. I don't know if they're going to get it. I don't know if they'll understand, but I was running out of material.
Probably social media all-stars already.
Oh yeah.
Probably, yeah. So, you already told us what kind of books sold. So you already polished off questions 1 to 3.
I'm sorry. I could expand a little more on that question if you wanted.
Sure, go ahead.
I was thinking specifically about the comics versus graphic novel divide. And what we sell in the bookstore is almost if on the comic side is almost exclusively trades. We almost never sell single issues. The one exception in my experience is the Black Panther run by Ta-Nehisi Coates, because that was just he's such a respected literary writer, and it was such an exciting, hot comic that we called Diamond and we're like, can we work this out? Can we figure this out? And we sold the single issues of those, the first singles of that run.
Would you know how, in comparison to a regular, say it was another Black Panther graphic novel, what's the gap?
What do you mean?
How much more did it sell because his name was on it?
Oh, so much more. I don't know if we'd ever really sold Black
Twice
Panther at all before.
5 times?
100%, because I don't think we'd ever sold Black Panther before. It was also the Black Panther movie and all of the excitement around Black Panther. It had never been at the level of the very limited number of superhero comics we sell. It hadn't been one of them before, but when he was writing it, it suddenly was the one thing that we couldn't keep in stock, which was fantastic. But for the most part, it's it's trades, it's things that you can take home one book and get a whole arc. So like I was saying, it's a lot of author-driven stuff. So it's Ta-Nehisi Coates, it's Brian K. Vaughan. We do a lot of Saga and Paper Girls and Y the Last Man, Monstrous, Umbrella Academy, Ms. Marvel, because I love Ms. Marvel. That's what I'm hand selling. And then on the sort of literary side, it's the perennials are Alison Bechdel and Art Spiegelman. We sell, Jason Lutz does really well for us, the Berlin series. We had an event with him last November, which was really great. Charles Burns, Mary Jane Satrapi, and all of those. The biggest growing category for us in graphic novels, though, is kids' graphic novels. is sort of the teen and middle grade series, which are huge, which are taking over the kids section like entirely. Like
what is middle grade?
Middle grade is like just below YA, so it's maybe like 8 to 12-year-old readers.
Okay.
But so like Raina Telgemeier is like just blowing everything away. My kid is 7 and she like has read every Raina Telgemeier book twice. She like can't. She's completely obsessed. But it's like Vera Brosgol, the Babysitters Club series. There's Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy was like a retelling of Little Women in graphic novel form that has been doing really well. And then a bunch of series in kids like the Amulet series, Lumberjanes, which is fabulous, the Olympian series by George O'Connor. But those are just like, we can't keep them in stock. And I feel like it's partly when kids are coming to reading, like comics are a way in because you get all this dialogue and all of this context, so it sort of like eases you into text reading in a way that's like more accessible. It's like why the Wimpy Kid books did so well, because it's like a mix of words and pictures. But it's also just like there's so many super talented creators working right now, and I think publishers have finally wrapped their head around how to publish comics, that it's just like a perfect storm of like really great stuff happening, and it's like all of our display tables in the kids section are dominated by graphic novels, so that's really big. The other thing that does sell is the quirky stuff that either it like has, you know, internet-y kind of fame, like we're doing a lot with Adventure Zone right now, or things that are hand sells from our staff. So I'm not the only comics geek in our store anymore. There's lots of people who read much more adventurously than I do, but like we've sold a ton of Coyote Dog Girl by Lisa Hannawalt because one of our staff picked that for the book group and for the graphic novel book group, and it's so cool and weird and everyone loves it. So there's a handful of titles like that that are sort of like off the beaten path, but one of our staff got a hold of it, thought it was great, and it's doing phenomenally. So yeah.
Now, maybe it's just me, but I feel like the YA and the children's market are dominated by girls.
Yeah.
Yeah?
I mean, I think that's, yeah, a really good point. And it's interesting, I feel like people complain about that in a weird way.
Which people?
So there used to, you know, there's Comic-Con and now there's BookCon. So BookCon used to be Book Expo, which was like an industry convention. And there's still like a little industry convention component of it where you like place orders and people have important meetings. But more and more it's a consumer show,
too, right,
which is great. It's ReadPop, also. But the fans who are coming are predominantly teen girls. And people are like, well, not take these people seriously. But it's like, you know, like Twilight. Everybody was like, what is Twilight? But you're like, teen girls are a powerful economic force. Like, what are you gonna do? They read. And I mean, a lot of the books that are working well in that space are about relationships and like, you know, figuring out middle school drama. Or, you know, in all different kinds of ways. But so it is an interesting that it is more female dominated when comics traditionally has not been.
But I wonder if the girls dominate the Raina Telgemeier, but then the boys are reading Naruto and things like that.
That's true. And we don't sell as much in the manga space, but I think that, you know, stores that are doing that is more of a boy. Although, you know, manga has so many subsections that there's like girls manga and boys manga.
Yeah.
And the kind that's only for grown-ups and, you know, like, so that's a good point. And it may be that like boy readers are just already reading superhero titles. You know, they're reading Miles Morales or, you know, Black Panther or whatever it is. But the ones that are specifically targeted for like a preteen audience tend to be
And I think more boys play video games.
That's also possible. Yeah.
Quick question about boys. What's the buying demographic of the Dogman series at your
Right.
store?
Oh, that's obviously. I mean, that's one of those hybrid kind of things. It's like, how does something get categorized officially? Like, we don't put Dogman in the graphic novel section, even though obviously it's a text and visuals hybrid. But that is predominantly boys, as was Captain Underpants. Although some girls like it too, obviously. But it's like that and Wimpy Kid and like Big Nate. All of those are sort of like, you could maybe call them graphic novels, but I don't necessarily think of that way because they're not sequential art necessarily.
Dogman is. Dogman
It is.
panels.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's totally a good point. Why don't we put it in graphic novels? I don't know.
Do you put it with Captain Underpants?
We put it with Captain Underpants, yeah, because that's where people are looking for Dave Pilkey. So we don't want to like hide it in the graphic novel section, which is not necessarily fair. But you're right. That's absolutely the exception, and Dogman is predominantly boys.
Here's a question that's not on the list. What do you think the chances are of a self-publisher to be as successful as, say, Dav? Is it Dav?
It is actually. It's pronounced Dave. I don't know why it doesn't have an E on it, but that's
Okay.
yeah.
It's because his name was misspelled when he was working at a KFC and he just stuck with it.
That's a great anecdote.
So again, the question: do you think a self-publisher, somebody who just either puts on Ingram or prints it and stores it in his garage, you think what are their chances of it becoming a big hit the way some of these other books are coming from publishers?
I mean, I don't think it's going to. If you stayed self-published, I don't think you could ever get that big. I think it is possible to self-publish and at some point get picked up by a major publisher, and then have that turn into major success. And sometimes that is, how you get started, is you build a platform so you can prove that you already have something of an audience. But I mean, just in terms of like the logistics of distribution, like you can't do that as a self-published author. And like how are people finding out about it? Like we find out about books from sales reps and from marketing campaigns and all that stuff. So it's definitely a good place to start if that's your goal, is like world domination, Dave Pilkey style. And there obviously are also ways to succeed on a different scale. But yeah, I think to get to that level, like you have to ultimately have different kind of distribution.
One of the things that was mentioned on Gina's podcast, and I was actually having this conversation with Heidi McDonald as well, is that a new category is the nonfiction graphic novel. And do you have any thoughts on that?
That's always been the funny thing. I feel like that's a conversation we've been having for the last like 15 or 20 years, is that like a huge percentage of graphic novels are not novels in any way. Like the two that sort of broke things open, Mouse and Fun Home, are both memoirs. Like they're not fiction. I mean, they're fictionalized to some degree, but they're not. They were never intended to be read as strictly fiction. So it's the category. It's an imperfect term, and it always has been. But it's meant to describe the medium rather than the content, I think. So yeah, there's lots of successful. I mean, I guess Jason Luce is definitely a fictionalized version of Berlin, but like, who's the guy who wrote Pyongyang, and he's sort of like a comics journalist, and Lucy Knisely writes a lot of like memoiristic comics, but like there's lots of really talented people doing nonfiction comics, but we put them all together.
What about outside of memoirs and biographies? Is there a growing graphic novel category that's like self-help or business or health or?
I mean, I think they tend to be more in narrative categories. I mean, I guess maybe the exception is like Scott McCloud. Like, Understanding Comics is not a narrative, but I mean, there were a couple of great comics about like the history of the civil rights movement, for example, or like travel or world history kind of things.
Is that growing, or is it basically some niche that's going to stay a niche?
I mean, I think it is. I mean, we find that nonfiction sales are growing for us across the board, because the world is crazy and everyone is like trying to understand what is going on in the world. Like they say like there's always an election bump. People read more nonfiction around elections, but it never went away. People are still trying to understand why the world is crazy. So we're more of our events are focused around nonfiction. Everything from like journalism to like social justice topics or whatever. And I think that's probably happening in comics as well.
Okay. Questions from the audience? Anybody? Go ahead. Robert.
All right. Well, just wondering. Say I have a book and I want to call random bookstores. Like, what kind of pitches and what do you look for me trying to sell a book to you?
That's a great question, and I think you said something earlier about relationships.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of it. I mean, every independent bookstore is making its own quirky decisions about what it wants to carry. For us, in terms of, so I mean, the first thing you have to do is get to know a little bit about the bookstore that you're pitching to, because you're not pitching to like a corporate buyer who's just making decisions for tons of stores. Each individual store has its own criteria. So for us, if we're looking at, I mean, if it's something that has local interest, we might be interested. We're going to ask first about the distribution, like where can we get this from? How do we buy this? So if it's from one of the major publishers, or it's an imprint or distributed by one of the major publishers, we're like, oh, that's easy. When it comes to like self-published books that we would take on consignment, we have a pretty strict policy that we focus on authors who live in our neighborhood, because there's so many self-published authors who want us to carry them that we can't, we have to set parameters somehow.
What about work in your neighborhood?
What's that?
How about
work in your neighborhood? You can make the pitch to the consignment buyer. I don't know. I'm not the person who has to make those decisions, luckily. But that way it becomes sort of like a community service, and there's a better chance that like your friends and family are also local and are going to come in looking for it, or that if you are doing, local marketing about it, you can send people to the store. So, but if somebody's like, I live in, the Upper West Side, we're like, well, you should probably go to a bookstore on the Upper West Side then. So it is about like building a relationship with your local store. And then, if that works really well, maybe you can use that as a pitch for the next store that you want to work with.
Greenlight bookstore carries my stuff.
Exactly.
I thought you might be interested.
Uh-huh.
And follow-up question: what's the location of your store?
We have two store locations. One is both in Brooklyn. One is in Fort Greene, like near the Brooklyn Academy of Music. So we really focus on Fort Greene, Clinton Hill authors in terms of self-published. The other store is in Prospect Lefferts Gardens, so like on the east side of Prospect Park. So like PLG, Ditmas Park, Lefferts Gardens, like all of those neighborhoods, like that's what we're looking for in terms of local.
Is it in your business card?
Yes, which I hope I
We'll
have
get back to that
We'll get back to
later.
that.
Yeah. So I have a book and I live in PLG.
Mhm.
Is that would I talk to them separately, or would I go through like the main branch and then?
There's separate,
Completely
on
separate.
consignment is specific to each store.
Okay.
For us, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how other stores
Sure.
do it necessarily, but we literally, it's about the neighborhood, and each store has a very different neighborhood identity. So the consignment buyer makes decisions separately for each store. It's all on our website. That's where you can find it. It's greenlightbookstore.com, and you look at like policies and FAQs, and it's like, here's how to place your consignment book. So
Cool.
it's all there.
And another question, sorry. How do you personally prefer to be like approached or talked to about this sort of thing? When somebody has a book, how do you like to, do you prefer like, somebody coming into the store, or like an email or something like
Yeah,
that?
I mean, the email is always where I'm always going to ask for an email, because then I like have all the information in writing and can refer to it and do my research or whatever. But the ideal thing I would say is if you've already been coming into the store and people know you, and the staff is like, oh hey, you shop here, like you genuinely have a relationship with the store. And then at that point when you're like, also I have a book coming out, I'm working on it, it's going to be ready in like a couple of months. We're like, great, that's awesome, email me about it.
Yeah.
And then we'll figure out how to get it in the store.
Cool.
So it's like, in person is how you build your relationships, but then I can't make decisions on the fly on the
Cool.
store. I
Yeah,
need
yeah,
the
yeah,
email.
yeah.
So
Cool.
if that makes sense.
Somebody had a question? Somebody else? Did you?
I chickened out.
Oh, come on.
Ask it.
A couple of questions. Actually, when you're talking about, how boys seem to be drawn to certain comics and girls seem to be, do you find that that's changing at all? Is that there's some gender fluidity to some of these?
Absolutely. I mean, yes, absolutely. I mean, I forgive me for talking about my kid, but she is 7 and she has loved superhero comics since she was literally walking. And her first favorite hero was Plastic Man. And for a really long time she was Robin all the time. She just wanted to play Robin. And now she's discovering that there are girl superheroes, which is awesome, and there are more of them than there used to be, and she loves Captain Marvel right now. It's like her obsession, obviously. But so yeah, I think and that's something that's happening a little bit in mainstream comics, is it's breaking open a little bit to gender and ethnicity, rather than it being like all white male heroes. So
Because like in
absolutely.
toy stores now, they're even starting to say, instead of girls,
Yes.
boys like toys.
I know, and I'm always advocating for that. The thing that drives me crazy is that I can't find action figures of the girl superheroes. Why aren't they making the action figures? It drives me crazy. Like, you could buy the Avengers set, but it didn't have Black Widow in it. Like, what? But there's also some great comics that actually deal with gender issues. One of my favorites that I was looking at on this list is Witch Boy, which is about, like, it's kind of a fantasy comic, but it's about, like, this boy who belongs to this magical family, but like boys do one kind of magic and girls do another kind of magic, but he's really good at girl magic. So like, what does he do? And like, he's hiding and trying to figure it all out. And it's like, so it's like it can be a medium for kids to actually explore that stuff. And I definitely, think that it's changing and evolving in really good ways.
Question: How did your daughter get exposed to Plastic Man?
There was this great cartoon series called Batman the Brave and the Bold.
Yes.
Did you watch that?
My kids were.
Oh my gosh, she was obsessed with it, and it's off Netflix now or whatever it was. But we watched like every episode, and that was how she learned the entire. Like she knew. I mean, little kids like to memorize stuff, and she like could memorize the entire DC.
My
canon.
kids know the entire DC canon, but not from reading comics, from watching Justice League
Yes.
and Brave and the Bold.
Yes. I know, and then for a long time she was obsessed with the DC Superhero Girls cartoon, which was really good. Now we're watching Marvel Rising, which I'm even
Just
more
as
fan of.
just a side
Yeah.
note, my wife runs 2 daycares,
Mhm.
one in Clinton Hill, which is where I work, and another one in Bed-Stuy. And we have an apartment above the Clinton Hill one,
Mhm.
and all my son's toys are still there. That was his outgrown. And I noticed one day that somehow the Superman and the Batman action figures were down in the daycare.
Mhm.
And so what I did was I made sure I went up and I dug through the toys and I found the Wonder Woman and the Supergirl.
Mhm.
And I brought it down to the daycare as well, just so
Yeah.
it would be
In the mix.
in the
Yeah.
mix. So
Good.
but the Bruce Timm Justice League Unlimited action figures, they have every character
Awesome.
practically.
So, yeah.
How do you see your bookstores evolving in the face of the challenges that retail and bookselling or in general are facing right now?
Yeah.
Great question.
I mean, I feel like we've been asked that question repeatedly for 10 years, and I mean, the answer is that like honestly, we're not trying to compete with Amazon, if that's what we're talking about, because we're in some ways in a really different business. Like we're not offering absolute cheapness and convenience. We're offering like a human experience that you come in and you discover something that you wouldn't have known to look for, that you have a conversation with another human, that you come to an event and you meet creators in real life, and that's worth something, and you buy books because of that. So, and as long as we continue to be good at that and keep getting better at it, then I feel like we're pretty safe. We opened during a recession, and the expression that I would hear is that books and booze are like what's recession proof.
Really?
Because books offer like, if you think about it, if you spend like $12 on a paperback, that's like 5 or 6 hours of entertainment, as opposed to like going to a movie or whatever. Like it's a lot of bang for your buck, and then you can read it again. It doesn't cost anything. So I feel like it's a good business to be in. I mean, not that we are sitting back on our laurels and being like everything will be fine forever. I mean, we have the same challenges that all of retail does, like minimum wages increase, cost of real estate has increased, like lots and lots of expenses with the same sales. So we just have to figure out how to like carve up the pie differently.
New York City rent.
I know,
You
yeah.
guys sell a lot.
We sell a lot of books. I mean, we have a really good landlord, fortunately, who like feels like a bookstore brings the value to the neighborhood, and then he can rent his rental apartments and be like, there's a bookstore here. So it's about relationships again. And I mean, the weird problem now that we have in Brooklyn is there are so many bookstores.
Yeah, well,
Since
another one
we've
just opened by
yeah.
BAM.
Yes, Center
Yeah,
for
so-
Fiction is like 2 blocks from us. And we're, we all have a good relationship with each other, but like, and it's like Bookstore Magic and Word and Community Bookstore and Powerhouse and lots of stores, but every once in a while it's like, I wanted that author for an event, like, so but that's obviously a good problem to have. Like there's lots of readers and lots of authors and lots of sort of literary culture happening in Brooklyn, so we're just trying to be
I think
part of that.
there's a quite backlash against being online
Mhm.
all the time. I think
Absolutely.
people are looking for experiences where you get to be around people live.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in theory, you guys could just do a video chat to do
Yeah.
that, but you come here to like meet people in real life. It matters. It matters to be in a room with other people.
Well, I know I get lonely, which is why I do this. And these guys know it.
That's not a bad reason.
Questions? Anybody else?
Nobody else?
Yeah.
Okay. So you said you do a lot of events and marketing and
Mhm.
stuff. So my partner, she also makes comics, and she actually wrote a comic for her PhD dissertation.
Mhm.
And there was like a big event where everybody like read something from their dissertation, and she was like, oh, what do I do?
How do I do this right? Yeah.
What do you have any ideas for how to sort of make a comics event
Yeah.
translate, or like give, somebody who doesn't know, have like already have a background with the comic, like, but who's interested
Right.
in this, like.
Yeah, that's always a good question. Is like how do you read a comic for an audience?
Yeah.
I mean, and the simple answer is we have a projector and a big screen, and we ask the author to bring in a visual presentation. Some authors really do want to like narrate the comic, and some authors will bring in actors to like help them sort of present it, or some will just sort of like talk about the art and talk about the narrative. So it depends on sort of what somebody's style is. We actually are starting a new graphic novel series. We're working with a guy named Michael Kupperman, who's like written a number of graphic novels, and he's really excited to sort of like do more with young and emerging artists, but also some established folks who have books that we can actually sell. But we had to like have a big conversation first about what is the quality of our AV tech. Like, can we make sure that we can show the visuals, because that feels really vital to be talking about comics.
Where do you have it in the space?
You've been to the Fort Greene store? Yeah, there's like in that one of those big front windows, like up in the ceiling, we like pull down the projector, and then everyone's facing towards the street, and there's like we have the projector.
It's a strange shape though.
It is a weird shape.
It's like a jigsaw puzzle.
I know, yeah, it's a funny kind of triangle, but it works somehow.
Okay, cool. Robert had a question?
Yeah, I keep hearing one of the biggest ways to get yourself out there is through building relationships. What if that's not your biggest strength?
We're not alone in asking that question. I don't know. Maybe then it's working with someone who is. Or I know it doesn't seem fair that like you should be the quality of your creative work getting into people's hands depends on you being an outgoing person, because like why would that necessarily correspond? But I think talking to people in person isn't necessarily the only way of building relationships. Like
there's
obviously social media is like a huge way that people are building platforms. That's a different kind of relationship, obviously, but it's a way for you to connect with people, because if you're not with a big publisher that has a big marketing department, like people literally have to find out about what you're doing, and like so somebody has to be putting it in front of them, and if it's not you, then maybe it's someone else. Maybe lots of aspiring authors that I know of have hired a marketer, a marketing solo or whatever. Or if you, I feel like the traditional model has been you work with an agent and then they pair you with the publisher who then has their marketing department. So, that's, I guess, in a way, if you're trying to make it as a self-published author, there's more required of you in terms of that relationship building and putting yourself out there. If that's the route that you take, that's gonna be the hard part. But but it doesn't always have to be about you doing that. There are other ways to kind of make it work.
The other way, I think, is to just create something that just blows everybody away.
Yes, obviously, if it's just so good.
I'm sure if Neil Adams was antisocial, he would still be pretty big. So.
Yeah, so there's like a history of antisocial.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the reason we all read books, right?
Right. So you don't have to talk to people. I know. It's weird.
Okay, any questions? You go ahead.
So like when you are in that phase of like ready to kind of rock and roll with you have your book and whatever, what is the pitch that you'd want to go to the bookstore with for that consignment? Like, here's my bio, here's the book, here's what it's about.
Sure.
What do you really? I know what a pitch means in the sense of like film and TV, but
right.
But how are you pitching a book?
Well, we have a bunch of this on our website, which I would recommend you look at. But for us, it's about why is this a good fit for our store? Sort of, do you know anything about what our market is? What our neighborhood is? Is there some kind of local connection? Is it set in this neighborhood? Is it a character that is going to resonate with this neighborhood? Do you what kind of connections do you have here, or what can you compare it to? Are there other authors that were like, oh, I get that? You're like, it's kind of like this. So it's about the fit. Yeah, it's not an absolute thing. It's very subjective.
So it's not more of the idea. It's more of like how you're gonna fit with the book.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it helps to know a little bit about your platform. If you're like, if you carry my book in your store, I'm gonna tell all of my Twitter followers that they should buy it here, or all of my friends and family, or whoever it is. Knowing that you're gonna be partnering on sort of getting the book actually sold into people's hands always helps.
It's funny when you said knowing the neighborhood is that because my wife runs a daycare, it's the same demographic, families.
Yeah, lots of young families.
A lot of young families. So, except we look for families whose babies are like a year old. So they're not reading yet.
Not reading yet, but you're building that.
Yes, we're building.
We have people who were babies when we opened, and now they're reading middle grade comics.
Exactly. Anybody else? Okay, here's my question. You've already given a lot of advice to the folks here as far as being creators. Is there any other advice that you could give that you think would really help a creator?
I mean, aside from my individual store, I feel like the relationship building thing, it's not just about building a relationship with people you want to carry your book, it's about building your creative relationships. And like doing this kind of thing is obviously fantastic, but going to events, where in whether it's cons or bookstores or whatever, and sort of seeing what kind of work people are doing and how they're getting published, but just like having conversations. I feel like that's how you build a career, is by sort of just like putting yourself in the room and seeing what's happening and where you might potentially fit into it. So I mean, obviously that you guys are here, you're doing that to some degree already, but New York obviously has lots and lots of opportunities for that beyond this, and I would encourage you to get out there and see them, and most of them are free, so there's no reason not to sort of learn more about the sort of local culture of comics.
Okay, and I think my last question, what place do you see comics has in the future of the book industry?
I like that question. I was talking about that with my the buyer for the store, who's like my fellow geek. We on Sunday morning we were like, did you see the news from Comic-Con? Like, do you know what's happening? So I was like, what do you think about this? Because I know, and he was like, we were talking about how we both used to have comic stores that we went to, comic shops in Brooklyn, and they're not around anymore.
Yes.
And I probably a lot of the same pressures that are on bookstores, but I think the additional pressure of like the distribution of comics is weirder. Being really dependent on one company, on Diamond, for distribution is not ideal.
Very often a comic shop is opened by a comic book fan, not a book
not
industry
a business
professional.
person necessarily. Yeah, and I feel like bookstores have had a nice shift over the last 10 years to people thinking of it more in a professional way and like doing a lot of education about the business before they jump in. And he was like, yeah, I don't really go to comic stores anymore. I just read on the Marvel app. And I was like, but we work in a bookstore. How can you say that? But so I think there's actually a lot of potential, because people who come into bookstores are book people. Like, they want the physical object, and comics, in some ways more than any other kind of book, like I feel like are meant to be, I mean, aside from webcomics, which are their own thing, are meant to be read as a physical book. Like, they have a tangibility, like the ink matters and the color matters and the size matters and the the turning of the page, the spreads, all of that stuff. Like, it's meant to be a physical object. So, and bookstores are where people are coming looking for those physical objects. So I hope there's more opportunity for kind of integration between like the comics world and the bookstore world, because bookstores are having this kind of a renaissance and comics are having a renaissance, but comic stores are not. So maybe bookstores can help to sort of like pick up the slack a little bit for where people discover comics. I feel like we all have a little more work to do in that, but I do think there's some real potential there. So that's my thought.
I want to share something. As some of you guys know, I teach at FIT, right? And right now we are suffering. Classes are being cut left and right because enrollment is down. Enrollment is down for two reasons. 18 years ago, the birth rate in this country was really low. The second reason is because foreign students are no longer coming to the U.S. So we're losing about a third of our enrollment at the college level. But we do know that about 10 or 11 years ago, the birth rate was really high.
We just hold
So
on.
we're just holding on.
They're
If you
like
can hold on for another
6
4 or
or
5
7.
years, we'll be golden, right? Now, the reason why I bring this up is because I get the feeling that the upcoming generations are much, much more exposed to comic books
Yeah.
than previous generations because libraries are carrying it now.
Yes.
You go to the library and you see a whole section of just
Right.
graphic novels.
Yeah.
I don't know why I bring this up. It's not a question.
Right. No, it's thinking about this question of like what's the future, and
Uh-huh.
I agree. I mean, and it was like 10 years. I mean, librarians always lead the way. Like they know the future. But I feel like 10 years ago it was all I was on all these panels and people were like what's a graphic novel, like literally. And we're way past that now.
Mhm.
But there's like another round that needs to happen where comics people discover bookstores. I
Uh-huh.
think so. Maybe that's what needs to happen next.
Yeah, that's true.
I think also the story, you can delve into more story
Mhm.
with graphic novel, and whereas when you're looking at regular books, it's like again, never myth, whatever.
Right.
So I think the stories are just so much more compelling. I think, and you're allowed to be more.
Yeah.
I think what it is this. Like back in the 70s, you had comics were for kids, but after that there was nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
And nowadays, if you want better stories after you're 8 years old, after
Yeah.
you're 12 years
Yeah,
old,
yeah,
after
yeah.
you're 14, it exists.
Mhm.
So I think that comic books are on the verge of being bigger than they ever have been.
Yeah.
Because there are books that cater to every age level,
Mhm.
unlike before it was just comic books for the 10 and 12-year-olds.
Mhm.
And publishers definitely think so. They're opening all these new imprints. There's
Yeah.
just
Who
a-
is?
Publishers. There's
Publishers,
just a
okay.
new
Yeah,
imprint at
yeah.
Harper and
Yeah,
Genius
Harper
are
just
one
just
at
announced
Random
it too.
House.
Yeah, Random
Yeah.
House.
So publishers.
Does Scholastic have its own graphic novel arm? Does? Okay.
Yes, graphics I think it's called, but yeah, they do Randy Togmeyer.
Yes.
Yeah, we touched on this before, but I just wanted to mention, my friend Michelle here and I, we went to a graphic novel class, like an illustration class, and our teacher Josh, I said to him, well, I guess I do graphic novels, but it's not a novel. Like I was saying, it's nonfiction, right?
Mhm.
He says, well, we would call it comic books in this class, but it's not highbrow enough. So we have to call it a graphic novel.
Yeah, I know that was I feel like there is like they were trying to find a word that made it not seem like comic. The comic makes it sound like it's funny, like funny papers, but that's like a tiny part of it. Yeah, but graphic novel is also not complete or big enough, and so no one has really I mean, sequential art is unfortunately a really boring term, but like I feel like that's what we're at. That's actually what they have in common, but sequential art, but like that's also not that useful. It's so boring.
yeah.
It's so academic. So somebody needs to invent a new word.
Well, what I noticed on Gina's podcast is they all just say comics.
Comics, yeah.
They just all say comics,
Yeah.
even though it's not necessarily traditional comics or mainstream comics.
Yeah.
Well, does comic imply that it's a series versus a graphic novel?
I think it depends about on the context, probably.
Yeah, it depends also who you ask.
Yeah, it depends on who you ask, for sure.
That's what I always-
Yeah, and it's been I've had to learn to talk about like comics creators
Uh-huh.
rather than comics writers because it's not just about the writer, like, and that's a thing to wrap your head around as someone who's used to shelving things alphabetically by author.
Okay. I think let's wrap it up. I'll ask one last question.
Sure.
What is your favorite right now comic book or graphic novel?
I talked about a couple of them. I mean,
Is there one that you really like above
Yeah.
all else?
I mean, I said that I love Miss Marvel, and I really love the Champions series, like on the superhero side. But also the Witch Boy, and that's the beginning of a series. I think is really interesting in the sort of like kids graphic novels realm. So those are. But I mean, I'll also actually Lumberjanes might be my all-time favorite. It's like it kind of has everything. It's like definitely has humor for grown-ups, and it's feminist and it's inclusive, but it's
What's
like
it called?
Lumberjanes. And it's about this group of girls at summer camp, but like all of these wild, magical, supernatural things happen to them, and they're all none of them. It's not like this is the smart one and this is the athletic one. Like they're all complex and interesting characters, but have really well-developed personalities, and it just goes on and on. It starts to become a joke that like the summer never ends, and that's part of the mystery of it. But it's so good, and I've been reading it for years, and it's like I wish it had existed when I was a little girl, but I'm glad that it exists now.
Okay, I totally lied. I have one more question.
You always have one more.
When I was a kid, my grandmother worked for a publisher, and then and they also had a chain of bookstores, and she had store credit, and I literally could buy every comic book. I could get every comic book I wanted because of her store credit. Does your daughter get to pick up whatever book she wants?
No, we have to buy it.
Okay.
We get an employee discount, but
Uh-huh.
we have to, yeah, so it's like, it's a treat. We have,
Okay.
you know, wait until she really deserves it.
That's because you're a mom. She was a grandma.
Yeah, no,
And so
that's a totally
she-
different
she had a
thing.
license to
Grandma's like,
spoil.
Unlimited.
Well, anyway, everybody, if you could give a nice round of applause for Jessica for coming. I thought it went really well. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Can we get a picture taken?
Oh, sure.
And if you guys feel free, like Relationships on Network, after these events, we have the room for another hour. Wow, another hour. So if you guys want to hang out and just talk comic books, please do. But we haven't done a group fiction in a long time, have we? John's looking at me like, not again. Frank, could you take our picture?
Oh, yeah.
How are we gonna do it? Here? Okay. Oh, not a group picture?
Just like.
Oh, no, no picture as well. Okay.
All right, I'll take a couple. All right.
Okay, everybody get in
Always
here.
ready.
Hey, I'll take the
Over
picture.
there.
Okay.
Oh yeah, over there, next to Jesse. Jessica, I hope you enjoyed it. My goal is to build a community of, because you don't have bullpens anymore, so.
Maybe that's what you should call it.
That's my dream actually, is to have a space where people can just come and hang out and draw and write and stuff. I need you guys to get in there. Okay, 1, 2, 3. One more. Smile. Something crazy. 1, 2, 3, go. Okay, thank you.
Questions. Oh, cool. Yeah. Yeah, you can take the G down to. You're paying the G line in the city, right? Yeah. Down to, what is it?
And the A and the C lets you off right there too.
Yeah. 4 green. Green point. There's a little bit further south. But yeah. But it's on. No. Yeah.
Take the G, all right, sweet.
Pleasure to meet you.
So nice to meet you.
Yeah, I listened to your interview on Grabbing Off the Day,
Oh,
and I
cool.
came to the Jason Lutz event,
Oh, awesome.
which was really fun. Yeah.
I was like a little.
It's amazing what you did. What especially the one volume.
There's a PayPal link on the website.
Okay, cool.
Because I think it for like 2 decades.
Yeah.
I just put something in.
Come next month, okay? Because it's Jason Gagliano.
It's like,
Thanks for your question. So don't never be afraid to ask a question.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to do more. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's hit and miss. Like I have to be careful to like do the marketing.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, you mentioned that on the interview, right?
Did I?
You're like, Charles Burns.
Oh my
like,
gosh,
no one here.
obviously it still haunts me. It's like so wrong. So I was like, this is huge. And I feel like if we did it now, it would be different, and it would still pretty much store. But there's like marketing to comic fans. It's like
Yeah, but it's really heartening to me that. I'll take one. I'll take one. So normal.
Just bring it up.
Is this whose comic?
It's my comic.
Bookstores.
Just bring it up issue once for everybody, so you take your.
Whichever one, I'll take a.
There's a 4.
I actually work
There's a
on
4.
oh, that's interesting. You're like,
I was like,
why
no,
are
they're
you
comics. They are.
so right.
Just-
Yeah.
But like they get put in the same box as
And
it's always we're always like fighting with that image of that self.
I'm Steve for everybody. It's about spies who work for an insurance company. And they're investigating a cult who worships guns and lives inside it. Yeah, you know, not based on.
Pick your brains for a minute. Yeah, but before, like I'm working before I start working on like a comic book, whatever. Is there certain size requirements, like for self-publishing, I mean? Like I found this online.
Now this is a standard traditional comic book size.
Oh, it is. Okay, I don't know. I mean,
When I measured it, it didn't say set. Okay, all right.
But what I'm noticing
Yes.
is now, who's your market? Who do you think is going to read this? Comic book geeks or little girls?
Neither.
Which one? What?
Are you a creator also?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I mean,
It's hard to say because it's not superheroes.
What's it about?
It's not.
But it's an advantage to sort of know so much about
Spiritual, compassion, nonfiction, Buddhism.
Then I would ignore this.
Oh, you
I would
ignore
ignore that.
Really?
Right.
Really? But it's very rock and roll too.
That's fine. What I would suggest is you go to a bookstore and you find something around this big.
Yeah.
Right. And you see, and you find several of them around this big. Find the most common size that are around this big.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why.
Yeah, please do.
The comic book size are for comic book geeks. Anybody else doesn't care. Anybody else would rather have a convenient size that they can carry.
Oh.
That's reason number one.
Is it cheaper? It's cheaper
Reason
to
number
make.
two,
Yeah.
three reasons.
Okay.
Cheaper because it's smaller, right?
There-
But here's the third reason.
Okay.
Smaller size means you spread out the art over more pages. So you can, if you were doing it this size, it might be a 50-page book, but if you do it this size, it might be a 100-page book.
And you want more pages?
Well, when you're buying a book and it's $10, would you rather buy a book that's this thick or this thick? It's an illusion because it's smaller.
Always thinking that Ramon's always thinking.
I've been thinking about this a long time. But
Gotcha. That makes sense. I didn't think of that.
All they see is how thick it is.
Right. It's a psychological truth. I got you.
So,
that makes sense.
nowadays, I prefer books to be small because then I can just carry it in my bag and I don't have to worry about.
Thank you for that info. See, that's, and I was wondering if there's certain.
There's no rule, but I would find what the most common sizes are around this size, around pocket book
or just like whatever a regular book would be.
I think a pocket book is too small, because the page is too small, but something in between.
5 by 7 or.
Like what you said about the regular novel.
That I think might be too small.
The size of a hardback.
Of a what?
Hardcover.
Okay.
Yeah, but it won't necessarily be a hardcover, but a hardcover is usually bigger, right?
Yeah.
And then a pocket book is usually like that. I would say something like this. So it's big enough
If you can get laid out.
So it's big enough that the pictures don't have to be small.
Right.
And so instead of having like 4 or 6 panels on each page, you have 2. You can spread it over more pages. And you're.
And then I hear people saying, which I'm not interested in, I hear people saying, well, they do this and then they shrink it
Oh yeah, that's very common.
Why?
Because a lot of people, it's harder to draw the sides, but it's easier to draw.
I like the font lines. I like the font lines. I don't care. Thank you for that feedback. That was very helpful.
Hey, Ramon, thanks for organizing, as always. Yeah.
Hey Jessica, I want you to share what.
Jan.
Jan asked me what size your book should be.
Oh, that's a really good question.
And here's what I told her. I told her that the standard comic book size, if you're selling to comic book collectors or geeks, then it's probably needs to be comic book. But she said it's a spiritual thing.
It's hard to explain.
So
the spiritual reading rock and roll.
So I said,
Yeah.
so I said, your readers aren't going to care what size it is, but they would like it to be convenient.
Yeah.
So I said, find the book size that's very common around this size.
Yeah.
And for 3, actually 2, but she suggested 3. Number 1, because it's more convenient. Number 2, because it'll probably be cheaper to print a smaller size.
Yes.
And number 3, you can spread the art out over more pages so you have a thicker book.
Sure. Yeah, I would say, look in the store at like the kind of books that you're looking at. I mean, we have like a spirituality section, and a lot of those paperbacks it's like 6 by 9. paperbacks. So if that's what how you're imagining where your reader is.
I
Most
I
important
like the
thing though
regular
is
comic book
make
size, but I
sure
hear what you're saying.
make sure the title can go on the spine.
Oh.
That was the other thing that I meant to say to
Good one.
everybody. I'm like that's
Thank
that's
you.
our other consignment criteria. It's like one, you have to live in the neighborhood. Two, you have to have the title on the spine. Because if your book is not going to be face out necessarily, it's going to go on a shelf. And if it just is like
So
staple
do you
bound,
find that the books that are consignment, how do you find that they do in the store?
it depends completely on how much the author promotes them. Like, we can only do so, we have thousands and thousands of titles in our store, so we can't, there's only so much promotion we can do for an individual title. But if an author tells everyone they know, go and get my book at this
And
store.
if you wanted to hire like a marketer,
Well,
like who,
yeah,
I'm sure the average marketing person
all the rest
is
of
not geared towards this.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Some people are, like, you sort of have to
Is there
look
a certain
around.
market, or you just look around?
I mean, it's like, if you go to the library and get Writers Market, it has all of the agents in there and like some PR firms and stuff. If you go to stuff like the Brooklyn Book Festival, like there will be people talking about what they do. So.
What would that be called if the spine, it's not spiral or staple bound, what would it be called?
Perfect bound.
Perfect bound, yes.
Perfect bound.
I want to ask you something. I wish I'd asked it in front of everybody.
So helpful, thank you.
And I just forgot the question. It was
About binding, about
Oh,
consignment.
no. Okay, so lately I've been actually just printing my books through Ingram.
Okay, yeah.
Which is nice because then a bookstore can order
Yes,
it.
exactly. It does make it easier.
Or somebody can order it from, because Ingram will also post it on Barnes and Noble and Amazon.
Sure.
Right. So if people can now post their books on Ingram and bookstores can order it directly from Ingram, what do we publishers force them? I know they have a full-time publicist.
Yes.
They have full-time sales reps.
Okay. Yes.
And they have
Exactly.
full-time, lots of people.
Yes.
So is that the answer?
Partly. I mean, when we order from Ingram, we still have to return books to them without paying a fee for that.
Yeah.
So it's harder for us to take a chance on something.
Yours are like from like a random house.
Yeah. If we can order big on the front list, so we can be like, we're going to put eight copies of this book out on a stack and see how they do. And then if we sell 3, then we return 4 of them later in the season or whatever. But if we're like, we can't afford to take 8, we're just going to take 2, then those go on a shelf and no one ever sees them and they don't sell at all. You know what I mean? So that's part of it. But I mean, the marketing and the distribution is no small thing. The sales reps, I mean, that's how we find out about a lot of books is by the sales reps coming into our store. Because the sales reps do know our store. They know what's associated with publishers. Yeah. Yeah. So if they're good, like they know their books and they know our store and they know which ones are going to be a good fit and we trust them. So.
When you return a book to a random house or some publisher like that, do you get all your money back?
Usually, if it's within the right time frame, if it's damaged, blah 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 set of criteria, but ideally yes. I mean, and that's something that we're talking about now because books are kind of a unique industry in that way, but it means that our discount on the books is lower than it is in publishers. Like for most books, we're paying 55 or 60% of the list price to the publisher because they're returnable. So that it lowers their risk and it mitigates our risk. If we can order all of our books non-returnable and only pay like 45 or 50% of the list price, but then we're stuck with them if they don't work. So it's a weird industry. Like the margins are smaller than anything, but we have this returnability.
Well, some publishers are willing to say that they'll buy the books back.
Right.
Yeah.
That would work. I've worked with a friend who had an indie comic and we had him in for story time and I was like, I don't know how many we can get because it's non-returnable. He's like, just get how many you need for the event. Whatever you don't sell, I will buy them back from you. And I was like, oh, okay. And he did. And that worked out great.
At the wholesale price, right?
Yeah, well, I can't remember how it worked out, but it worked for everyone, whatever it was.
Come on, do you know how I can find, do you know people that work with certain printers?
Do I know people who work with certain printers?
Like for self-publishing. Like where would I find that information? You know what I mean?
Email me.
Yeah?
With printing
Sorry?
Does Stephen do a good job with printing comics?
Pretty good, yeah.
Good quality?
I'm a graphic designer by training, so it's all second nature to me. And actually what I do is... No, I don't.
Well, I think it's on the meetup.
It's on the meetup page. If you Google me, you'll find my website. But I'm actually building a website, or I'm on the offer to basically just do production on people's books.
Yeah.
You know,
Sweet. Good.
so basically, all you would have to do is send me your finished pages, and I will put it together for you. I will lay out the covers, the insides, create the PDF.
There you go. There you go.
You know, and actually,
Problem solved.
what I was doing, and here's how do you think of this, right? Because I got the idea to do class, this class I'm teaching Bookstores ends tomorrow. And I promised them that I would take all the comics and I would make comic books for them, and then mail them the actual comics. Or I could just upload it to India, put a cover price on it, and their aunts and uncles can order it, right? I wouldn't even charge them to play it out. I would just put it up there, and I would just take $1 for every book that gets sold.
Sure.
You know, and if the relatives want to order 20, they can do that, right? So I think that's not. I mean, it's not going to feed my family, but I need some extra money for maybe 6 hours of work. You know, so.
Production thing, I mean,
So I'm thinking that maybe, if I can do it for little kids, why not do it for a lot of novice people too? I mean, it takes. I've been doing graphic design for 30 years, so I can lay out a book with my eyes closed.
Great. Alright, we'll talk soon. Thank you again. All this information is so helpful.
Yeah, thank you for giving that information.
Well, thank you so much for getting me.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, no, this was great.
I'll come by
You
the
guys
store.
can.
I would like mix like Western and Eastern animation.
Is that Teen Titans Go?
No, the first one.
The first
Original, not like the comics, but
It's like no.
like one where they did in like
Teen Titans Go.
eventually. No, it's the type of one where they all
Oh, you're talking about that? No, I usually get those two mixed up because Teen Titans, the first Teen Titans, it's like they have the song Teen Titans Go, and I'm like, right. No, I'm not like that. I mean, that's a great style. I would say, I'd like to say.
That kind of
Mobile Studio, it's new model.
What's the software? Photoshop Sketch?
This is Manga Studios.
Manga Studio?
Yes, but this is the older model of Manga Studios. Right now it's called Clip Studios.
Now, can this only run drawing programs, or can it run work like an iPad too? Like, does it have apps, other apps?
I'm working iPad.
Can you like look at Facebook and watch movies and stuff like that?
This way?
Yeah.
Well, I believe so, but I've been so focused on just just art that I never really expanded on it.
Nice, sorry.
But I would say,
That's the pen.
yeah, just one way to try it out. But if you're looking for an iPad, I would, me personally, I would recommend going to like MacBook Pro. That's just, I feel that that's kind of like.
But that's not touch on the screen. MacBook Pro? I have the iPad Pro.
That's
It's a little bit bigger than, it's a little bit shorter but wider than this. And it's got the pencil, which I like slightly better because the nib is not plastic.
Yes.
It's actually rubbery, so there's resistance. I don't slide across the screen.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. Everyone's like recommending that device. But the thing is that they actually do have Linear Art Studios, which is a new name for Manga Studios. So, and it is compatible with your pad.
Hey, what time is it? 8:13. Oh, cool. I have my suit.
You may as well take advantage of the room and table, right?
Yeah. I bought the suit, but I ran out of time.
I would say, well, I'm trying my best not to say Bruce Timm, because Bruce is the most popular.
Bruce Timm is awesome.
Yes. Right.
I think,
Yeah.
so you know how it says like TVY7, like the upper corner?
Yes, TVY7.
I was the only family
Yeah.
that actually like listened to that. My parents told me I wasn't allowed to watch that until I turned 7.
Oh.
So like all of the Bruce Timm shows.
Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to watch that until I turned 7.
Yeah.
When I finally turned 7.
Even Justice League
Justice
and
League,
Batman
and all of that. Just allowed to watch it until 7.
Was Raven the Bull Bruce Timm too?
And just generally.
Which one?
Was Raven the Bull Bruce Timm too?
We executive produced them, but it wasn't the same, wasn't the same universe.
Not saying that, but maybe just like the same production team almost? 'Cause
I mean, yeah, he like executive produced, Teen Titans, but he didn't, it wasn't the same universe, you know.
Just like your ass, which do you prefer, Teen Titans or Teen Titans Go? Yeah. Really?
Yeah, I mean, I'm old though, that's why. I know like all the younger people like Go better.
Yeah, I'm older.
I can't tell the difference between the two.
Well, from what I can tell from Teen Titans is that it has like more of a consistent story throughout season 1 to 2 and stuff. Whereas I'm led to believe Teen Titans Go is more kind of like small pockets of short stories.
Yeah, it's just episodic. It's just stuff happens, and then if you forget what happens, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. It's like
a sitcom.
Yeah, like remember one time they turned to pies and they ate each other, and they never even answered what happened afterwards. So, but
That's bizarre. I can totally see him doing that.
I think that's Greg Murakami, right?
He did the first one.
He's the first one?
Yeah. And then he disappeared. He did like Beware the Batman, and then he disappeared. I don't know what happened to him.
yeah, like, what was going on with Beware the Batman? I was hoping that would
He
be
got
the next.
canceled.
Yeah, like,
Low ratings.
I was hoping that was gonna be the next big thing.
Yeah. That got canceled, and then he did his production company also did the Green Lantern show.
Yeah.
And that got canceled because of the low ratings, and
Man, I was hoping that
Young
would be
Justice
something.
got canceled the same year, and then they brought it back eventually. But,
Yeah.
they canceled everything that year.
Yeah, it sucked. I mean, like, that's the only thing that bugs me when it comes to shows like this, is like, they don't really take gambles anymore. Like, if the ratings suck, automatically you're dead. Like, I wish they actually had a show where.
Well, that was the thing. Young Justice did really well.
Yeah.
They canceled it because a lot of girls were watching it, and they didn't know how to market it anymore.
What?
That was what they said.
I've heard stories like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, if you cancel the action figure, then it's just gone.
Because they were trying to market it to boys, and then like half of their audience were girls. So they're like, well, what the hell do we do? Let's cancel it.
That makes zero sense. I mean, like, I'm led to believe that. I'm just talking from the sense of a state of logic. I'm no businessman, but I'm just talking from a state of logic.
You just market it the same way you've always been marketing.
Yeah, either that or adapt the market to actually cater to it to an extent, so long as you don't sacrifice the ideas of what you're making. Like,
Well, what you have to factor into also politics happens at these places.
Really?
You know, so. Are they being sarcastic or not?
I can't tell either. I thought you were being serious.
I'm being serious because, like, I can't remember what show they say was canceled because the wife of the network president didn't like the show, and that's why they canceled
It
it.
might have been Titans, original Titans.
No, it was
There's
like a
5 different
it was like a
reasons that
60s
got
show.
canceled.
You know, I can't remember what the show was.
Yeah, I remember like in an interview that this guy who does voice acting, and he talked about the fact that some people won't hire certain people because they dated or something like that. like the executive dated this person, or they just heard like word of mouth and stuff. So
That'll happen. That happens with movies, I know.
Have you guys seen that Kevin Smith talk when he talks about writing the Superman movie?
Oh,
He has so many
Superman Lives,
podcasts,
what
that
happened?
guy.
I'm sorry?
The death of Superman Lives, what happened?
Yeah.
They talked about that.
Oh,
on
with Tim Burton. That was it.
No, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he wrote the script for. Steve, hope to see you again. Okay?
Yeah, I'll be back. I won't be at the next one. I'm going to be out of town, but hopefully the next one after that.
Okay,
Cool.
but we're gonna have a event between the next one and another, and the one after that will be more of a social thing. So try to come to that.
Sounds good. All right.
This baby.
You know what I'm thinking of doing? I'm not sure if I brought this up last week. Like a shut up and draw.
But you can't draw.
Or shut up and write or draw. You know, where we all get together and we just find a place and we just, for like 2 hours, we just work and then take breaks, you know, and chat.
Do we do like a review afterwards or what?
Well, the ones that I've been to that are shut up and write, they don't review each. It's just motivation for you to actually sit down and get work done.
Right.
That could be fun.
You know.
Yeah, I actually went to a shop and write. That kind of led me to force me to make my book and stuff.
Yeah, I got my script done because I went to shut up and write.
Because you felt.
Everybody else is working, so you feel like you had to work also.
Yeah, that's more accountable. It's like it was accountability to an extent.
Yeah. That's what's good with all those meetups.
So maybe you call it Shut Up and Create.
We don't have to call. We don't have to put the word "shut up" in there.
Just be quiet. Just be quiet. Get to work.
But just something so that it's not all just speakers, you know.
Expanding on it.
My dream is that if rent wasn't so expensive in New York City, to have a space that could just be a bullpen where everybody could just come in and draw, you know. It's like what people used to do at Neil Adams' studio. That, you know, they would come to his studio to visit and just hang out and visit with people.
Might I make a suggestion if you're open to it?
What?
Well, one idea is maybe you can just like check out just free spaces where like cafes and stuff where they allow people to like just sit and do whatever they want.
I've been looking for a space like that. I've been
That's
having
a
other
solid idea.
Huh?
I'm talking to a bunch of them, but they're pretty expensive.
We'll probably get a conference room for that.
Well, I'm talking about more like cafes.
But of all the libraries, they all close at like 5 or 6.
Oh yeah.
So I already thought about libraries.
Yeah.
I was thinking like there's this place called Everyday Gourmet on 39th and Lex, and they have an upstairs seating, so anybody who buys anything downstairs can just sit up there. And it used to be a lot of couches, but they got rid of most of the couches and now it's booths. So
Yeah, one of the bread and butters, I think it's over on like.
the bread and butters are good too.
Yeah.
There's one where like a bunch of people were getting together to do D&D, and they brought their entire mess and spread it out over the tables. And
There was another comic book meeting at a bread and butter too. I don't know what happened to them.
There's that one. There's Aspiring Creators Meetup Group, and they meet at a deli also.
Right. I know you guys. And there's also a Whole Foods market at Seaport area, and I've seen several people do D&D there, and nobody, you know, and they don't really kick them out at all. So.
And I'd be lucky just to get a seat in Whole Foods.
By the way, for the Diversity Comic Con in October, if anybody can come to that, I'm looking for team leaders for different areas. So, you know, like I'm the team leader for the panels, and I'm a team leader for the registration, and a team leader for cosplay pageant, and one more team leader for the artist alley. So I'm gonna have student volunteers, but I don't know if I can trust them to make decisions on the fly.
So the email that you use for like the newsletter, is that the same email you use for contacting?
Yeah, you can contact me there.
Okay.
Or all that sci-fi. Trash can.
Oh, by the way, writer or an artist?
Oh, right.
Oh.
Take care. Thanks for coming.
I'll be here the next one.
Sci-fi.org or
Sci-fi.com.
I have a quick question about that anthology. Is it ever going to be available online somewhere to purchase or anything like that? So I had a few people ask me about that. I was like,
Oh, really?
I don't know if it's gonna be online.
You know what? Let me because right now it's only available with my login. Let me figure out how to make it available to anybody who logs on, so that anybody can just order it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's because I was looking on the Chronicle Comics website to see, so I was like, maybe I can find a link for you, and I looked on it, and it still looks like it doesn't exist, but
Yeah, let me figure that out. Let me add that to my.
We're still using the Meetup app, right? Because I think I went to one meeting and you said that you were gonna stop using that and
No. There's no reason not to use the Meetup app. Meetup